Alright, kind of response video to Nicotine Guy. I'll play about 4 seconds of his video because it was really boring.
Normative ethics is the branch of ethics that deals with the question, how should one act? It is traditionally the most widely discussed branch of ethics and consists of the sort of debates most people associate with moral philosophy. You could say that of all the branches of ethics, normative ethics is the most ethicsy. Or you could not say that. Let's begin by examining normative ethics' relationship to the other branches of ethics. Normative ethics is closely related to, yet distinct from, metaethics and applied ethics. As I discussed in my video on metaethics,
Oh, fuck. I mean, yeah, I mean, who could stand that? I mean, who couldn't listen to that shit? But anyway, this whole idea of having to break it down into all these categories of all this ethical crap and what the fucking... No, it's just bullshit. I keep saying it, but there's a truth out there, and all we're doing is defining it. We don't need 4 or 5 or 10 branches of intellectual perspective to define it. All right, so let's just get the easy part out of the way. There is 2 considerations. There's the absolute factual description of something's effect, and then there's practicality. Okay, so in the practical real world, we can't be sure that we're always right about our judgments. We can think somebody's a murderer, but he might not be, so we can't do the vigilante thing, and we can't act on our own judgment. We have to qualify it to some agreeable standard, and that's sort of what we call the social contract. So in a civilization, you make a concession to the social contract, to this agreement between people that, yeah, I won't decide you're a useless piece of shit and kill you, and you make sure you don't do the same thing to me. It's the do unto others as have others do unto you thing. It's just a way of guaranteeing civil order and some sort of minimum standard. All right. But the real point is what are we as individuals? And so what's of value? That's how you define what ethics are, or what values are, what morality is. You have to define what the values are, and that's all there is. It's just a value equation. And so, I mean, as human beings, what are we? We're what we personally feel, you know, what desires we have, and what needs we have. So let's say that you're there's maybe 2 elements to your existence. There's your basic disposition, you know, needing food, needing comfort, warmth, all that kind of stuff, the basics, and then there's this stuff extra you want, like I want to be President of the United States or some kind of crap. So those ambitions are on top of this basic welfare thing, like you feel good or you feel bad. You know, you're having a good sensation, bad sensation thing. And obviously satisfaction of some kind of desires is sometimes going to affect that. I mean, whether you're getting any, you know, is going to affect how you feel. Alright, and then there's the part where it goes outside of you and your behavior affects other creatures of equal or to some extent relative value to you. Maybe diminished, but relative, they have some value. So we could put other humans in one category, and then, you know, animals, you know, we can argue about where they belong on this relative scale of, you know, how many suffering beasties, how many suffering pigs equals one suffering human kind of crap. But there's a truth out there to these questions. It's not just some sort of philosophical game. It's a game where we're trying to define the reality, not just some subjective crap, not just some agreeable subjective perspective. There's an efficiency equation to this life thing. There are good states and there are bad states of conscious experience. And the idea is to maximize the good states of conscious experience and to minimize the bad states of conscious experience. And we know what causes bad states, okay? Poisoning the environment causes bad conscious states because people get sick. There's lots of ways to go through the equations. And individuals will have their own definition of what is worth paying for. I mean, just like all of us are going to have a definition of how much something's worth. You know, you might pay more for a Lamborghini than I would. I mean, I might pay, $4.58, and you might actually spend $150,000 or $200,000 because you might think it actually has value. And the same thing is in our lives. I mean, some people will experience a great deal of personal suffering to, buy themselves 4 or 5 more months of life, let's say. They'll have some dramatic surgery and go through a rehabilitation or extend their life, even though it's going to be kind of miserable, because in their brain there's a value equation where what they're getting is going to be worth the price they're going to pay for it. And somebody else can have a different definition. And I wouldn't argue that these are easy questions for us to fight over, but my argument is that ultimately there is an intelligent truth regarding that answer, that even if somebody thinks it's a value equation worth extending themselves, worth investing in, the truth is there's a truth underlying that equation. Just, I think all rational people could look at a heroin addict, I've used this example, and say that his psychology, his perception that his life is worth living in that state where he's a parasite on other people and he himself is miserable, isn't worth it. The high is not worth the low. And it's a stupid value. There's just a stupid psychology that makes it possible, and it's called addiction. And that's what runs most of our perceptions, unfortunately, in these value equations, is we go based on some kind of personal subjective addiction or attachment. So we are able to do the it's cute thing, or it's tasty, or it's some other bullshit that is completely a psychological perception. The value isn't in the thing, it's only in our perception of its desirability. And what we duct tape. It's really pissing me off. Anyway, it should work better now. So yeah, it's just a perception of values. It's not real value, but there is a real value out there, and we can make it's so easy. Humans find it so much easier to make these value judgments when they're dealing with something that isn't human, like an animal or something. I mean, they can say, okay, it's not worth it suffering when it's dying. They put it to sleep. They don't sit there and think, oh, well, maybe it thinks it's doing something that's worth doing, or maybe it has another bone to bury, or some other bullshit. It does the logical thing, because it knows that it's just a waste of suffering. And the fact is, those human beings are too stupid to figure that out when they or somebody they care about is in that position. Because they keep thinking it's not even thinking, it's sort of how we're built. I mean, we're built to be survival machines. That's the genetic imperative, and that gets in our way. That pollutes our perception of ethics and values. But again, the bottom line is there's a value here, and it's called a quality of existence. And being in a non-negative state of consciousness, and there's a fact about whether or not you create more of that in the world or whether you create less of that in the world through your influence. So it's not only about what you feel and how happy you are in your life or how comfortable you are in your life. There is also the equation of how much work did you cause other people to have to do to support your life. How many, what was your contribution? Let's say 5,000 people die in coal mines in China to produce our cheaper goods. I mean, what's our individual contribution to that suffering? I mean, how much of that suffering do each one of us have to take accountability for, in the sense that we influence the system that creates that circumstance and creates that liability? And that's the price of our existence. We don't live for free. We live, our life is defined by our net effect, by adding up how much suffering we prevent, how much comfort we give, and how much comfort we steal from somebody else, or take, or buy, or purchase, or excrete, however you want to use, whatever terminology you're comfortable with, that we give people the gift of suffering so they may suffer for our existence, or some other bullshit. But yeah, those are the values. That's the diamond, or that's the gold. That's the currency that we're trading here. And so if you think of it in those terms, that the real currency of life is this conscious state of being, this comfort versus suffering, you know, nice feelings versus bad, hostile feelings, attraction versus repulsion. I didn't put that very well, but you get it, okay? That's the currency of life, and that currency is created not only inside human beings, but it's also created inside of sentient animal beings, and we have to add it all up. It's all part of the equation of how we define what's productive and what's the net effect going to be on the future. This is how you define morality and ethics and value.